I did the ALI course 2 years ago, and it really was important to me. There were some things I carried away about, you know, the students are supposed to be spending more time with me practicing skills than actually getting information, which I found very puzzling. And it also helped me a lot to watch the video of Eric Mazur at Harvard. I just couldn't take that out of my mind, and I recommend it to everybody. In fact, I tediously inflicted on everybody because I have the video now, my TAs and those sorts of things, because I have, in fact, turned the class around to that, where I expect them to be walking into the class having done the reading, done the homework, seen the podcast, whatever, and then we have a discussion. And so at that point, we have a very different discussion. And you know, the problem with Eric Mazur's video is he doesn't show you everything. And so some of us are left saying, well, what is it that I wonder how he does this or that. But we have, Anno and I have been sort of co-course directors. And one of the things that's been the most fun sort of taking on technology has been the people. Anno is a former student of mine. He's a journalist with Consumer Reports on Health. I'm an epidemiologist and a medical doctor, and really wanted to do this, but it is much more fun to have somebody who loves the topic and loves experimentation. We had previously written a grant about interactive journalism that fortunately wasn't funded, and we ended up instead turning it into a grant for a venture fund, and that was a much better thing for us because it let us bring many parts of our lives together. What that also let us do is get this major support from Barbara, from Josh, from Susan, from Decal, to really call up on the phone and ask some questions as we sort of launched into this world. I do want to say sort of that major forces for success were hiring a teenager. I hired a 17-year-old as my TA, and it was the best thing I ever did. And that we also had a very good student group, but also the folks that I work with were very willing to let us try some things. And first, I just wanted to show you one of the projects. Anno and I had an idea of students themselves creating AV content. And we were given the idea that that would be a really high goal. And we might not get there in this grant. And but because of certain kinds of technology, one of them is Jing. It's an online product that you can download. And this is, for our term, we have a 2-course class that starts 1 credit in the summer, 3 credits in the fall. This is one of the products that the students has turned in for this course.
Yeah, what was the course?
Social and behavioral determinants of health. It's a non-health system factor.
This, you can't actually hear her voice.
Oh, really?
Her voice is narrating over this right now. I can hear it down here, but it's not plugged in. And this is one of the little bit of problems in here is just that you can't see the whole screen, and that was.
You can normally if you teach the person one thing they need to know, and you can if that's one of the issues across some of use of some of this technology is on my computer I see it perfectly. My Mac has a big screen, and so I don't know often what some people are experiencing, which takes some discussion. But this first one came in, we had some students turn in the project early so that we would learn about what it was. You know, we took some of those really ready ones, and so Anna was one. She turned it in on Emil Durkheim. That told us some things about, whoops, what isn't obvious, and so a few more have turned theirs in. Do you want to?
Oh, we also one of the other examples that we had, because I don't think that they'll see the whole thing.
We have become Jing fanatics. I Jing everything, and I blame Josh for that, but it is, it allows you 5 minutes, it's straightforward, and that's a lot of how we have become, we talk to each other as our staff in meetings. I send things to students, they're sending things back to me. Anyway,
this is another one. The screen is a little bit, normally I can do this, we can see the whole view.
We can open it in a separate window.
Yeah, just open it and you.
But, will that take us a second, or? Okay, thank you. We wanted to reformat the course that we had, which is Social and Behavioral Determinants of Health. It is a course that's required for Masters of Public Health students. These are graduate students. 1 minute, let me just. So, and they are we are trying to have them understand some things about where health comes from. And it is, if you can imagine from our target audience, it is a struggle sometimes because most people think if you listen to the radio or go through school that it comes from money and insurance companies and the health system. And so we're really trying to talk about the rest of their lives and to get them to experience something that they can then take and start to use the data that we're teaching them about. So in the summer, they are going into communities, they are walking around, they are taking film, and Susan and Jones Media helped us with that. We learned a great deal. And then at this time, they are much more working on taking particular content and populating something that we will put up on the web, which I can show later. Go ahead.
This is an example that we did, and yet some of the other student projects are coming in that are looking more like this. And the idea was you were to look at sort of one study. So this is a review. Again, you won't be able to hear the voice, but if you get a sense of what's going on here, that the people, instead of writing a report or writing sort of a survey, they can sort of find a creative way to present the information in a way that's both sort of intellectually rigorous, but also is like hearable, instead of trying to read 15 JAMA papers or papers from the American Medical Association. They could present something like this, which summarizes evidence in sort of everyday language. The nice thing about Jing is that it works really well and easy with PowerPoint slides. It's free, and so it has some limitations. One is the time length. It can only be 5 minutes, which is really convenient because then you can tell students, hey, you only have 5 minutes. You have 40 students, so we wouldn't want 40 10-minute presentations. It's also kind of handy because down at the bottom, you could stop it right here, so you can say, oh wait, I want to read this, and it pauses it. Or as I'm reviewing some of these, going back, you can remember that they said something funky way over here, so you can sort of advance it. It works really great with graphics.
It really is something you can, our students are learning it on their own in a matter of 5 minutes. We ran a piece of our course last week that talked to them. We offered them the opportunity of writing an op-ed, doing a piece for VPR, doing a Jing, based on a map I have of the determinants of health, and they picked different topics that they can take. But they are, Jing is something that is particularly for people that are younger, that are more fluent with computers. But even Anno and I learned it very, very quickly. It's, the hardest part is once you have a product, what do you do with it? But that's not hard. And the other thing about Jing is that you can send it to someone and do an exact description. Because if you are looking at one of the things that Josh has done many times for me is a just-in-time kind of save, which means here comes, I have a question, he says, oh, you want to know how to put your Jing thing up on Blackboard. And it will have, can you go, I guess you never can hear the voices, but I guess the next time I would say, let's make sure we can hear the sound. It kind of takes away from the thunder. Josh will send me a Jing which is just a screencast of what it is that I'm trying to do. And so I'm looking at his screen, and he's showing me all the steps that he's doing to get it there in less than 5 minutes. I have my screen open, and I'm following him at the same time, and I'm getting my task done. I put these up on Blackboard so that my TAs and I know how to get it on YouTube, how to make it so you can subscribe to the course via iTunes for all the rich media and things like that, so that it doesn't go away. But also, it's like when you need it, you really need it. And it's only 3 minutes, but if you had to call somebody and go through all that or look up tutorials, those sorts of things. Yeah, so down, I don't want to open all of them, but down at the bottom here, I think, this is the second course. Yeah, there's a how to create Jing, there's how to subscribe. So these kinds of tutorials turn out, we had them originally just for us, but we, in fact, as we started having students become more and more interested, we began to share these as they started making them as well. I want to back up a bit, that we were trying to solve a problem of having the idea of taking your course and saying, well, I really want to use it for practice. Then the question is, how do I begin to make sure that the students know the material at some point so that we are practicing something? And in my course, what we're practicing is multiple disciplines. So could you get me the model, the map? I've come up with a sort of organizing framework that helped me, that is both a sort of academic product in public health, but it has also helped me help keep the students, so I'll say, here we are on the map. And I'm talking about a three-dimensional sort of object. We can go to Google Docs. If you go inside the virtual presentation, go down. There, map of influencing factors. Yeah, it's okay. And fortunately, open with PowerPoint or preview. But to an extent that this idea of what is it that makes people healthy? Well, it's psychology, it's sociology, it's culture, it's, which is sort of up from the individual to the population level. It's a crossover to environment. And there really isn't any particular study that doesn't have some discipline that doesn't have an importance to health. So that in a sense, we want the students to come out having learned some of the main facts, as well as having had a chance to really discuss and to experience with us. So we took them to Barre, Vermont. We broke them into 6 different groups, 10 different groups, no more than 4 people per group. One went off to look at housing. One went off to look at the Barre granite quarry. One went off to look at someplace else. And they then, so in a sense, we're sending them off and saying, well, there's an overview of where does health come from, and then there are these different topics that are in fact three-dimensional and moving across, interacting with each other, right? So if you working in environment, that's going to be influenced by policy, which is going to also influence things at both the individual level and at the population level. That where you live, you are embedded in a certain social cultural environment. So that is a very broad idea for students, and to an extent that I want them to understand enough that they can go into any one of these topics and come out in another, that they have the epidemiology and mathematical skills to begin to work with some of this, but they also can begin to talk about it, whether it's in poetry, in sociology, primatology, whatever. We began to use, so to get them to say, all right, we are to even talk about this, we need to give them things beforehand. And one of the things that we started to do was making podcasts as part of their readings. And I don't know if there's a sample one you would suggest. But what I do want to say is that this is something that we organize. What we're hoping to do is at the end of the course, the materials that they've produced, for example, Anna did something psychosocial culture on Durkheim and how suicide rates are constant across populations. That would be then something that you could click on and look at within that so that you could see her Jing. You could read her abstract, which would tell you a little bit more about it. Somebody else wants to do something about the influence of music as a healing art. Somebody else is doing laughter. Somebody else is doing, the Gini index for income inequality, various things like that. That the students have made something that we would put up on the web that we could start to describe to as an academic exercise, but also to our next students, how they might see the classic literature in this topic. So we then began to make sort of podcasts, and that's how we got started. That was really for us, using different sorts of things. And it helped a lot because Josh and Barbara and other folks kept saying, you will be the people learning this. So we tried different sorts of software, which I don't enjoy learning software. I'm not one of those people that does, so I'm not probably different than most people. But I did really want it to look okay. I wanted it to be easy. And I think I'm on my 4th screencast program. I thought, oh, well, I just leave them all behind, but I don't. I mean, there's parts where I think, okay, that was a good one. I have a favorite now, if it's over 5 minutes, that sort of thing. But really, what I will say is that we did an evaluation of the students from the summer term, asking them about it. And I was really touched with how much they described sort of the intimacy that comes with watching their professor on a podcast doing some of the things. That there was a kind of relationship building that happened that came off of the discussion board, which we also had, and the podcast, which were sometimes 5 minutes, sometimes 20 minutes. I learned a lot about how I need to parse and structure my material. A podcast longer than about 15 or 20 minutes is too long. And we go into classes all the time and are talking hours at a time. And so that has been quite a lesson.
Sorry, are you on podcast, video podcast, or just audio?
But they're video, but we do have both. You wanted to show, I apologize, there's not sound, but we make them, yeah, we can show you.
There are some audio ones too, like there's a fellow, Sapolsky, Robert Sapolsky, who's out in California.
Nicholas
He
is
does lectures, and you can get his podcasts on iTunes. So rather than us try to explain to them,
Yeah, sometimes what I, yeah.
To do it. So
Yeah.
there are some just audio only, which is nice to put them on their iPads, and you can, go on a treadmill or go for a drive or whatever.
So yeah, we will sometimes pull things off of NPR. We also can adapt it so that I'll take a piece of Radiolab using Audacity or QuickTime Pro and take a chunk where somebody's explained something really well and then just make a file that I can put up. I couldn't have done any of this in June. Zero. I can talk about some of it and I can do a lot of it. And I know where to go if I need more help. I mean, I think that the students really appreciate us trying to meet them where they live. And they know this technology so much better. And as we have gone along, we found ourselves doing more and more of turning it over to them, like the discussion board. What do you want to do? Which one do you want to use?
We should show this one
Okay.
because it's short and it has some audio. This is one I was going to post on YouTube because it's so low.
In case there are any lingering doubts about the importance and power of public health messaging, I just wanted to show an example that I've recently found. Of course, we're all familiar with the idea of public service announcements reminding people to sort of seek other interventions, such as reminding them to get flu shots, etc. Or there can be communication projects that aim at reminding physicians about new evidence about treatment guidelines, etc. But there are also situations where the message itself is the intervention. So ask yourself if this looks like a public health problem to you. This is from September 2005 in Montana. You can see there's, basically there's a big crystal meth problem. 50% of incarcerated folks and children in foster care are there due to meth-related issues, and they rank number 5th overall for meth abuse. So for them, they were lucky enough to have a wealthy benefactor who was a retired business person who lived in Montana, who did see this, as obviously other folks did, as a public health problem. And he approached it from a business perspective, looking at it as you would any business product, and that you need to do market research to market and sell something. In this case, he sort of reversed it.
Go to where you also do show. I mean, in this you've included
created an unmarketing campaign to unsell meth. He hired Hollywood directors to come up with concepts, and here's an example of one of the advertisements that they developed.
Yeah, just go. Okay, now, play it out. Look. You did it, kid. You're in. You're one of us now. You did it. All this is yours. We're gonna be shooting up together. We're gonna steal together. Sleeping together. Just sleep together. You're gonna love every single minute. No! I'm trying it just this once.
I don't know for those of you familiar with it, like we put this one up to YouTube. There are others that we will put up in different ways. I don't want to make, if you're not fluent with YouTube and iPods and those things, you don't have to be to start to decide, because on the Blackboard site, can we just go to media so they can see the side? Yeah. Okay. Yeah. And this is actually site. So for us, on our media section, and for example, our website, our Blackboard site might tell people where to go for the readings or the experience preparatory to the class period to answer the homework, which they turn in prior to the class. And so and then there will be optional ones. So what baboons can teach us comes from section 2. They can download that. They can actually subscribe to our course and it downloads to their iPod, or they can have it downloaded to their computer, and so they will just listen then to that particular one. And then there are optional ones. I don't know if that gives you a better picture. rather than go on too much, I'd be curious if you have questions. This may not.
Okay. Well, shall we take some questions now? Do you want to hold the questions?
Can you just say a little bit about Jing and what it is?
I probably would turn that to Josh, actually,
Okay.
who's better at it.
Yeah, we can, Jing's simply a screen capture program. It captures
Anything that's on your
anything on your screen plus.
And you can tell it what, because it doesn't have to
Only
be
this
everything.
window.
Yes.
Okay.
And that's one of the examples where if you get interested, we'll come work
Yes.
with you, and then we'll think about your Blackboard course with you about how you could do this. Curricular Computing wants to work with you on these kind of things. So
Yeah.
come find us.
To be able to sort of, not have to write a whole email, but to say to people directly, and sometimes, I don't know if in Jing, but where another one of the programs I have, you can see me talking to you in a 2 or 3 minute thing, and that is a very different experience than this email that, Yeah.
My intro to Jing was when Susan, you had a problem with a library resource. It wasn't working right, Search 360, and you jinged me what was going on exactly. And it was so much better than trying to follow. Well, then I did this and it failed here, and So actually, we really, if you want to jing problems with information resources that are digital and not working, well, that really worked
And it's
very
that
well.
quick and easy to create.
And your students can do it, and they can load it up to Blackboard,
Awesome.
so they can be totally self-sufficient.
So this is just an example of a question that we asked. I'm sorry, the screen is, look like I can do that, does it?
And the recipient doesn't have to have Jing on their computer. Any nobody can just click on it and do it.
goes to the
Just
lab.
get this little file.
Yeah.
But it is then a walkthrough.
I wanted to show you something that might be useful. If you submit a link to an ad or that kind of thing, what you can do, and I've added one here just for fun, is that you go in and highlight the link, then go up and actually you can create in it a hyperlink. And in this case, I might say that it doesn't make a big difference, but let's say I'm using a commercial example. Okay.
Anyway, but what I'm doing is trying to show them, and they can go through the steps. And for a computer problem, it has no better, I've never seen a better solution. It's so obvious, because then you can see the steps. But for other kinds of things, where you're either, a very short talk, or even, and I don't know, can you put the camera like Profcast does, or?
No.
Okay, all right.
But we have other
Just
solutions
so.
for that.
Excellent, exactly. Yeah. Anyway,
Come see us, we'll show you some cool stuff.
Okay.
yeah. Yeah, I will say that, one of the things I got a better and better appreciation for is that students live in a really different world. And a world that, they need to take that world into my specialty of public health or into medicine. And I realized I am an obstacle to that, because they come into the program and I then have them get rid of all of the technology that they would normally use, or it becomes their hobby. The games, the kinds of things that they are doing in terms of creating with technology, and we weren't using it. So now we're trying to, and they have, we turned our discussion board discussion into a very big discussion, because it was, I'd never seen them so engaged, and they knew in exquisite depth the kinds of things that they wanted and didn't want, and that sort of thing. And we ended up making a decision, and I think that there is a whole wealth of how the discussion board can be used, when it's not useful, where they did and didn't want it, how do these things connect with Blackboard. But I really want to feel like they are able to continue the learning and not have to dismiss it while they're in their university.
You said this is a class of 40 people?
It's 43 this term.
Okay. So what do you do in class now?
Let's see, it varies, and that's the thing. For example, last time I did a very Eric Mazur thing. They turned in their homework, and on Monday, I went through, picked out the questions that they'd ask, because that's part of their homework, is not only tell me things, but ask things. I took those questions and turned it around into a presentation, which in terms of making a presentation is great. There were 5 or 6 things that kept coming up, and so we talked about how does taxation affect income equality in the United States, or in various things. And so then we had a one hour session doing that. We next broke into small groups, and one group learned Jing for half an hour, one group worked on their projects, one group worked with the discussion board questions. Another time we did a active thing, we played out Dr. Evil, How You Destroy the World, which turns out if I say to you, well, what produces health? You say, I don't know. If I say, okay, you're Dr. Evil and you're going to destroy the health of the world, tell me how you do it. And I made a little thing with Dr. Evil and Austin Powers, and it's very hokey. But in fact, I broke them into groups and said, you're the economic advisor for Dr. Evil and you're the policy analyst, and they come together and suddenly have exceptional detail on how to do that, which we have been, and that they sort of then get at the end of it, that, wow, this looks a lot like our current public policy. I would just get rid of all the air quality measures so that we're all breathing dirty air, and then I would make sure nobody has health care, and I'd get rid of the education system, but if I ask them at the front end, they have. So in class we did Dr. Evil, and we played it out, which we wouldn't have had the time for. I mean, I think one of the things that Anno and I found was that we were starting to do things that normally got pushed off to the edges, like how do you learn Jing, would have been it would have been a thing they'd done as homework, where instead, now that we've done the academic content, and the belief, and it's very Quaker almost, is they will be okay with this. They know how to get information, particularly if we tell them where to go. And I have a very, this is an act of faith, but I also have each time, and I'll just very briefly not be able to show you because I can't figure out what to do with this, but the, or did I get rid of it? In the Blackboard site, I have a place where they can go for good readings on topics that's divided up by topics. So it's like, if you're looking into this, go there. And so there are a lot of things posted versus me saying, here are 4 readings that you read for this topic. Yeah?
So you have essentially pushed all the content delivery outside
Almost.
of the classroom space.
Yeah. Yes, it's frightening. But it is not as, when you think about what we actually ask them to do, which is they sit and listen to us talk and deliver all the content in a certain way. And in ALI, what you learn is we learn by creating it. We learn by working with it. We learn by owning it. We learn by kinesthetically manipulating it. And that's the part we want to oversee and to really, the idea of making determinants into a 3-dimensional model, I have either the saddest or funniest Jing, or not a Jing, but a screencast of me with strings all over my fingers, trying to show them the determinants of health. If I move this one moves, and look, and then somebody else, Anno did it with a Mobius strip where you cut it, and then you cut it, and then you cut it, and then somebody else is talking, so that we are hopefully having them come in looking at the creative edge of the content. Yeah.
I would just like to point out that in her 3-second description of ALI, she did a better job describing ALI than I did in the 10 minutes I took.
It's hard.
They know that you learn by creating
yeah.
it, not by
yeah.
absorbing it. That was the point of ALI.
Right. and but to sort of say, okay, well, you can't create it unless you know something. And I think for Anno and I, we took them to Barry. It's his hometown. He's the assistant health officer. We dropped a busload of upper middle class students into Barry, Vermont, in a 2-day period. And we have a wonderful film of the mayor of Barry talking about, which we got at the time as well. But having them experience, health or some of these topics, if you go to Barry and start walking around and take a role, like, okay, you are 24 years old, you have this much money, you're trying to find affordable housing. My students are now walking around going, do you know it takes a 100-page application to do affordable housing? 100 pages. I mean, they're just outraged. And it's like, do you know it's terrible to be poor? Like, yeah, guess you didn't, But so I think those sorts of things where we try to make sure that we are putting them in circumstances, they are scared of it. And it's hard. For me, I take things personally. So when they say, I wish you'd told us everything we needed to know before we went. And Anno and I specifically did not do that. We specifically said, they're going to walk into that circumstance and we will never have said health. Otherwise, they'll immediately go looking for doctors and hospitals and all that stuff. And so we were sending them out with topics. We sent them to the graveyard. We sent one group to the graveyard, one group to look at the Main Street economics, one group to look at something else. And they were making videos and stories. And so I think that deciding what are the experiences that are rich enough, and then being sort of, have enough callous that when they're confused, to keep trying to build the trust, to say, trust me, you'll get there, it'll be okay, you may feel. And how do we build that in a sense so that, because it's, I mean, Eric Mazur says it in his, that if at first the students are flipped out because you're changing the rules, and they are not, that they don't take that lightly. Especially a third of my students are pre-med,